Young Virginia girl accidentally tore the millionaire's vest. What happened next was unbelievable. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into our story. As Emma left the restaurant, she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had been nervous and awkward, but somehow, Kevin made her feel a little more at ease. The night had ended with some mild embarrassment, but also with a spark of curiosity about him that she couldn't shake. She stepped out into the cool evening air, wrapping her coat tighter around her. She knew she had made a fool of herself, but there was something about Kevin that kept her thinking. Maybe it was the way he smiled despite the awkward start, or how he seemed genuinely interested in hearing her stories. She smiled to herself as she walked to her car, telling herself that it was just one of those strange, funny moments in life. Little did she know, that awkward blind date was only the beginning of an unbelievable journey that would change her life forever. As the days passed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between her and Kevin. Their second date had gone better than she ever expected, and now they were texting each other daily, sharing small moments of their lives. Kevin had become someone she looked forward to hearing from, but despite all the laughter and connection, there was still a part of her that felt uncertain. She still didn't know much about him, and there were things he wasn't telling her. She wondered if there was more to him than he was letting on. One evening, as she sat in her apartment sipping tea, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from Kevin. "Hey, do you want to meet up again? I've got something important to tell you." Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't like Kevin to be so serious, and the fact that he had something important to say only fueled her curiosity. Without wasting any time, she replied, "Of course. When and where?" He sent her a location, an upscale restaurant in the city, and told her to meet him there in an hour. She quickly got ready, trying to push aside the nervousness that crept in. As she drove to the restaurant, she couldn't help but think about the mysterious message. What was it that Kevin needed to tell her? Was it something good? Or was he about to drop a bombshell on her? When she arrived, Kevin was already waiting for her. He looked as handsome as ever, but there was an air of seriousness about him that made her stomach tighten. "Hey, Emma," he greeted, standing up as she approached. His smile was warm, but his eyes held a certain tension. "Hey, Kevin, you said you had something important to tell me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He nodded, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I do, but before I say anything, I need you to know that I've really enjoyed spending time with you these past few weeks," he began. "I like you, Emma. I really do." Emma's heart raced at his words. She hadn't expected such a direct confession, and it took her by surprise. "I like you too, Kevin," she replied, her voice soft. But she could tell there was more to come. Kevin paused for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "There's something I haven't told you about me," he said finally. "Something important." Emma's curiosity deepened, and she leaned in slightly, waiting for him to continue. "The truth is," Kevin continued, "I'm not just some guy who works in tech. I'm the CEO of a major tech company. My name is Kevin Carter, and I'm worth millions." Emma blinked, trying to process his words. The man sitting across from her, the man she had been getting to know, was a billionaire? She felt a rush of emotions, surprise, confusion, and even a little bit of disbelief. You're the CEO?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Kevin nodded, his expression serious. "Yes. And I never meant to hide it from you. I didn't want you to like me because of my wealth, but because of who I am." Emma sat back in her chair, stunned. She had no idea how to react. The man she had been casually seeing, the one who had seemed so down to earth, was someone entirely different. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed, her thoughts racing. Kevin looked at her, his eyes searching her face for any sign of understanding. "I get that this is a lot to take in," he said, "but I wanted to be honest with you. I really like you, Emma. I want to be with you. No games, no pretending." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had never imagined this would be the truth about Kevin. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much she had come to care for him. But now that she knew who he really was, would their connection change? Could she still trust him the same way? "I'm just shocked," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect this," Kevin nodded, understanding. "I know, it's a lot to process, and I didn't want to overwhelm you, but I couldn't keep this from you any longer." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Kevin's confession hanging between them. Emma's mind was spinning. She had to admit she was still drawn to him. But she wasn't sure if this new revelation would change everything. "Kevin," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I don't know what this means yet, but I need some time to think." Kevin's face softened, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "Take all the time you need, Emma. I'm not going anywhere. I just wanted to be honest with you." Emma nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. She felt a mix of emotions, relief that he had finally told her the truth, confusion over what it meant for their relationship, and a growing sense of uncertainty about what would come next. As they left the restaurant that night, Emma couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her and Kevin. She was starting to realize that their connection might be deeper than she initially thought. But with Kevin's true identity revealed, she knew that things would never be the same again. As the days went by, Emma found herself struggling to process everything she had learned about Kevin. The truth about him being a billionaire CEO had rocked her to her core. She had been so sure that he was just a regular guy, someone she could relate to, someone she could see a future with. But now, she wasn't so sure. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, his earnest confession, and her heart couldn't decide if she should embrace this new reality or run from it. Kevin, on the other hand, seemed to be nothing but patient. He respected her need for space, never pushing her for answers, but always making sure she knew that he was there for her. He texted her daily, asking how she was feeling and if she needed anything. He would send little things like flowers or a book he thought she might like, as if trying to show her that his feelings were genuine, that the wealth he possessed was secondary to his interest in her as a person. Still, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship had somehow shifted. The excitement of their initial connection had been clouded by this new layer of complexity. She wanted to believe that Kevin was being sincere, but doubts crept into her mind. She hadn't come from money. Her life had always been a struggle, and the idea of being with someone so wealthy felt like stepping into a world she didn't belong in. Would their differences eventually tear them apart? She spent days thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons, until she couldn't take the uncertainty any longer. One Saturday morning, she decided to call Kevin and ask to meet. They agreed on a quiet park where they could talk privately. When Emma arrived, Kevin was already there, sitting on a bench, looking thoughtful. He stood up when he saw her and smiled warmly, but Emma could see the worry in his eyes. "Hey," he said softly, giving her a gentle hug. "How are you doing?" Emma smiled faintly, her heart still heavy with confusion. "I'm okay," she replied, sitting down beside him. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About you. About us." Kevin nodded, waiting patiently for her to continue. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking again. "I've always believed that honesty is important in a relationship," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "And I know you've been honest with me. But I need to ask, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you hide who you are?" Kevin's face softened with understanding. "I never wanted to hide it from you," he said quietly. "But I wanted you to see me, not my wealth. I wanted you to like me for who I am, not because of what I have. And honestly, I was afraid. I was afraid that once you knew the truth, you would see me as just a rich guy, and nothing more. I didn't want that. I wanted to be real with you." Emma felt a pang in her chest at his words. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability he was showing her. It wasn't easy for him either. "I get it," she said softly, "but it's just a lot to take in. I don't come from that world, Kevin. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable in it, and I'm scared. I'm scared that things will change between us, that this difference in our lives will become too big to ignore." Kevin reached out and took her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Emma," he said, his voice steady, "I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm not asking you to fit into a world that doesn't feel like your own. What I'm asking is for you to give me a chance. to let me show you that we can make this work, that we can be happy together, no matter what. You mean more to me than anything else in this world, and I want to prove that to you." Emma looked at him, her heart torn. She had never imagined that her life would take a turn like this. She had never thought she would be faced with a decision like this one. But as she stared into Kevin's eyes, she realized that she had feelings for him that went beyond his wealth. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew that she didn't want to walk away from him. "Not yet. I'm willing to try," she said finally, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know where this will go, but I want to see where we can go together." Kevin's face lit up with a smile that made Emma's heart flutter. "You won't regret it," he said, his voice full of warmth and relief. They sat together in silence for a moment, both of them contemplating the uncertainty of the future, but also the hope that came with this new chapter in their lives. Emma wasn't sure what would happen next. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that she wasn't ready to give up on something that felt so real. With Kevin by her side, she was willing to face whatever came their way. For the first time in days, Emma felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had made her decision, and now, it was time to take the next step forward. Little did she know, though, that the journey ahead would not be as simple as it seemed. The past was not easily forgotten, and there were secrets yet to be uncovered. Secrets that would test the strength of their bond in ways they never could have anticipated. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Kevin found themselves navigating a new dynamic in their relationship. The initial shock of Kevin's revelation had passed, and they were beginning to settle into a routine. They spent time together on weekends, exploring new places in the city, and getting to know each other on a deeper level. Emma was learning more about Kevin's world, but he was also making a conscious effort to understand hers. He never pressured her to embrace the luxury and status that came with his wealth, but he always made sure she knew that she was the most important thing to him. But despite the growing connection between them, Emma still felt a sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Kevin wasn't telling her, something more than his wealth that he was keeping hidden. It wasn't just his business empire that left her feeling uncertain. It was the way he sometimes avoided talking about his past, the guarded look in his eyes whenever the topic came up. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in his luxurious penthouse, Kevin received a call that seemed to unsettle him. He excused himself to take the call in private, leaving Emma to wonder what was going on. When he returned, his usual calm demeanor was replaced by something else, a tension she hadn't seen before. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with concern. Kevin gave her a tight-lipped smile. "Yeah, just some business stuff," he replied, brushing it off. But Emma wasn't convinced. She could tell something was off, and the nagging feeling in her stomach grew stronger. "Kevin, what's going on?" she asked, her voice softer now. He hesitated, looking at her with uncertainty. "It's nothing, really. Just some issues at work," he said again, but his eyes avoided hers. Emma didn't press further, but the silence that followed felt heavy. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Emma found herself unable to sleep. Her mind raced with questions. What was Kevin hiding? She had come to trust him, to care for him deeply, but the walls he had built around himself were still very much in place. Why did he feel the need to protect her from whatever it was? Was it something she couldn't handle? The next day, Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She wasn't one to sit idly by when something felt wrong. Kevin had been nothing but kind and genuine with her, but she needed answers. She knew that whatever it was, they couldn't move forward without clearing the air. That afternoon, she found herself standing in front of the glass doors of Kevin's office building. Her heart raced, but her resolve was firm. She was ready to face whatever truth Kevin was hiding. She made her way to the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor, where his office was located. When the elevator doors opened, Emma stepped out into a sleek, modern hallway. She could hear the low hum of conversation coming from the offices, but she didn't stop. She knew where she was going. As she reached Kevin's office, she hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then, she knocked. Kevin looked up in surprise when he saw her standing at the door. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he asked, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady but firm. "About what happened last night, about everything." Kevin's face softened, but there was a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. He stood up, motioning for her to come in. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he said, his voice low. "I wasn't planning on telling you, not yet, but I can see that you need to know." Emma walked into his office, feeling a sense of unease settling over her. She took a seat across from him, her eyes never leaving his face. "What do I need to know?" she asked, her heart pounding. Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There are things about my past that I've been keeping from you. Things that I didn't think you would understand. I've been trying to protect you from it, but I realize now that it's not fair to you." He paused as if gathering his thoughts. "The truth is, I didn't build my business on my own. My family was involved, my father, my uncle. They were the ones who made all the connections, set up the deals, and built the empire. I just inherited it, and I never wanted to rely on them, but it's been hard to get out from under their shadow. I've tried to do it on my own, but the pressure's always been there." Emma listened, trying to take in what he was saying. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the weight of the past that still haunted him. "I never wanted you to think I was some rich kid who had everything handed to him," Kevin continued, his voice quieter now. "I worked hard to build something of my own, but sometimes I feel like I'm just living in their shadow, and I didn't want you to see me like that, to think I wasn't enough." Emma's heart ached for him as she listened. She had no idea the pressure he had been under, the burden of living up to expectations that weren't his own. "Kevin, I never thought of you that way," she said softly, her voice filled with understanding. "I care about you for who you are, not for what you have. I just want you to be honest with me." Kevin looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and relief. "I've been afraid of losing you," he admitted. "Afraid that if you knew the truth, you wouldn't want to be with me anymore." Emma reached across the desk, taking his hand in hers. "You don't have to hide from me," she said, her voice gentle. "We're in this together." Kevin smiled, a real smile this time, and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." As they sat there, hand in hand, Emma realized that this was just another chapter in their journey together. They had both faced their fears, and now they could move forward, knowing that they could be honest with each other. And while the road ahead might still be uncertain, they would face it together stronger than before. After the heart-to-heart conversation in Kevin's office, Emma felt a shift in their relationship. There was a new sense of clarity between them. Kevin had opened up, revealing the complexity of his past. And in doing so, he had made her realize that their connection was about so much more than just his wealth. It was about their shared moments, their honesty, and their willingness to face the challenges together. But even though Emma felt a weight lifted, the path ahead was still uncertain. Kevin's confession had brought them closer, but it had also raised new questions, questions that Emma needed time to process. The following week, things seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm. They continued to spend time together, enjoying simple outings, dinners, and walks in the park. Kevin was attentive, thoughtful, and patient, always making sure Emma felt comfortable in his world, never pushing her to fit into a lifestyle she wasn't familiar with. Yet, there were moments when Emma still felt a distance between them. She had come to love Kevin, but the stark contrast between her humble background and his opulent life occasionally felt like an invisible wall. She wanted to understand his world, to be a part of it, but at times, it seemed like that world was too far beyond her reach. One evening, they decided to attend a gala, a charity event hosted by Kevin's company. Emma had agreed to go, partly out of curiosity, partly because she knew it was important to Kevin. The event was being held at one of the city's most prestigious hotels, and as they arrived, Emma couldn't help but feel out of place. The glittering chandeliers, the elegantly dressed guests, the red carpet, all of it was so far removed from the world she had known. Kevin, however, was in his element. He moved through the crowd with ease, exchanging pleasantries with CEOs, donors, and dignitaries, all while keeping an arm around Emma, as if to reassure her that she belonged beside him. As the evening unfolded, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was an outsider. She smiled politely when people spoke to her, tried to engage in conversations, but she felt like she didn't know how to keep up. Kevin was effortlessly charming, and people seemed drawn to him, admiring his confidence, his success. But Emma, no matter how hard she tried, couldn't help but feel small in comparison. As the night wore on, Kevin noticed her discomfort. He had been so caught up in the socializing that he hadn't seen how uncomfortable Emma had become. Taking her hand gently, he led her to a quieter corner of the venue. "Emma, you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She gave him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, just not really used to this kind of thing," she admitted. "It's all so overwhelming." Kevin's expression softened, and he took a step closer. "I know it's a lot. I never want you to feel uncomfortable, Emma. This isn't my world without you in it. If you want to leave, we can go. No questions asked." Emma felt a surge of gratitude for his understanding, but at the same time, she knew she couldn't keep running from his world. She had to face it, not just for Kevin, but for herself. "No, I'm okay," she said, her voice firmer now. "I just need a little time to adjust, that's all. I'm not used to being in places like this, but I'm willing to try. For us." Kevin smiled, his relief palpable. "You don't have to do this for me, Emma," he said softly. "But if you're willing to try, I'll be here every step of the way." The night continued, and Emma found herself gradually feeling more at ease. She had moments where she still felt like an outsider, but with Kevin by her side, she felt supported. As the gala came to a close, Kevin took her hand and led her out onto the balcony, away from the noise of the event. The cool night air felt refreshing, and for a moment, they were alone, just the two of them. "I'm proud of you," Kevin said quietly, his gaze fixed on her. "You were amazing tonight." Emma laughed softly, the tension from the evening finally melting away. "I don't know about that," she said with a playful grin. "I felt like a fish out of water." Kevin squeezed her hand, his voice serious. "You don't have to be anything but yourself with me. That's all I want, Emma. Just you." For the first time that night, Emma felt completely at peace. She had been uncertain about so many things, the wealth, the lifestyle, her place in it all, but in that moment, standing on the balcony with Kevin, she realized that none of that mattered. What mattered was their connection, the bond they were building, and the trust they had in each other. As they stood there together, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Emma knew that this journey, with all its ups and downs, was just the beginning. She wasn't sure what the future held. But for the first time in a long while, she was ready to face it with an open heart and a clear mind. Kevin had shown her his world, and now it was time for her to show him hers. As Emma and Kevin continued to grow closer, the bond between them deepened in ways neither of them expected. The trust that had blossomed from their honest conversations began to feel unbreakable. But Emma still couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease she had whenever Kevin's past seemed to surface. Despite the warmth and affection they shared, there were moments when Emma felt as though she was walking in the shadows of a life that was beyond her reach. Yet, she couldn't deny the chemistry they had. And each time she was with him, the connection felt more and more like something real. One afternoon, as they were enjoying a quiet walk through a park near Kevin's apartment, he stopped to tie his shoe. Emma, lost in her thoughts, continued walking, unaware that she had drifted a few steps ahead. When she turned around, she found herself face to face with a man she did not recognize. He was tall, well-dressed in a suit that spoke of luxury, and had an air of confidence that immediately made Emma feel uneasy. He smiled as he approached her. "Well, well, if it isn't the lovely Emma," he said, his voice smooth but with a hint of something she couldn't place. Emma took a step back, confused. "Excuse me, do I know you?" she asked, her voice cautious. The man chuckled, an almost mocking sound. "I'm sure you've heard of me. I'm Richard Langford, a longtime friend of Kevin's." At the mention of Kevin's name, Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to run into anyone from Kevin's past, and the way Richard spoke about him immediately set off a sense of unease. "I didn't realize Kevin had mentioned me to you," Emma said, trying to mask her discomfort. "Oh, he's mentioned you plenty," Richard replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "He's been quite taken with you, it seems. I just never expected him to go for someone like you." Emma bristled at the implication. "And what does that mean?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. Richard's smile widened. "Oh, nothing. Just that you're not exactly the type he usually surrounds himself with." Emma's blood began to boil, but before she could respond, Kevin appeared beside her, his expression darkening when he saw Richard. "Richard, what the hell are you doing here?" Kevin's voice was tense, and there was an unmistakable edge to it that Emma had never heard before. Richard's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, Kevin, I was just having a friendly chat with your lady here. Didn't mean to interrupt." Kevin stepped closer to Emma, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "You've done enough," he said, his voice low. "Now, leave us alone." Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by Kevin's reaction. "Fine, fine. I'll be on my way," he said, turning to leave. But before he walked away, he glanced over his shoulder with a smirk. "Just be careful, Kevin. Not everyone can handle your world. You might find that out the hard way." With that, he walked off, leaving Emma and Kevin standing in the park, the air between them charged with tension. Emma turned to Kevin, her thoughts a whirlwind. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. Kevin exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "That was Richard Langford. He's been a part of my family's circle for years. He's got a way of making everything seem like a game, and he's never liked me making my own decisions. I've always kept him at arm's length." Emma's mind raced. She hadn't expected Kevin's past to come with so much baggage. "Is he always like that?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Kevin nodded, his expression hardening. "Yeah, he is. He's always had this idea of how I should live my life, but I'm not about to let him control me." Emma looked at him, her heart heavy with mixed emotions. She had always known that Kevin's life came with complications, but hearing it so directly from someone who had been in his world for so long made everything feel more real. "I don't understand," she said softly. "What does he mean by, 'not everyone can handle your world'?" Kevin sighed, his gaze distant. "It's a threat, Emma. Richard thinks I'm weak for stepping away from the family business and trying to make my own path. He's always believed that wealth and power are everything, and anyone who doesn't think that way is just not worth his time." Emma's heart sank as she listened. She had known that Kevin's family and their expectations had weighed heavily on him, but hearing Richard's words made her realize just how much pressure he was under. "Kevin, I didn't realize," she started, her voice filled with empathy. "You don't have to explain it to me," Kevin interrupted, turning to face her fully. "I never wanted you to be a part of that world. I didn't want to bring you into the mess my family creates. But I'm not going to let someone like Richard make me feel bad about choosing my own path." Emma reached out and took his hand, her heart swelling with affection for him. "I'm not going anywhere, Kevin," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here for you, no matter what. We're in this together." Kevin looked at her, his eyes softening. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm glad for that." The tension between them began to lift, but Emma knew that their journey was far from over. Kevin had a past he couldn't escape, and Emma would have to face it if she wanted to be with him. But as they stood there in the park, hands intertwined, Emma felt a deep sense of resolve. No matter what came next, they would face it together. In the days that followed the unsettling encounter with Richard, Emma found herself torn between wanting to fully embrace her relationship with Kevin and the lingering doubts about his world. She had seen a glimpse of what it entailed, the power dynamics, the expectations from his family, and the influence of people like Richard. Yet, despite all the challenges, Emma knew deep down that her feelings for Kevin were real. She wasn't about to let the shadows of his past dictate her future. She just needed to understand more. Kevin, for his part, had done his best to reassure her. He was more open than he had been before, taking her to quiet spots in the city to talk, sharing more about his childhood, his struggles with family, and the pressure he felt every day. But Emma also noticed the small changes in him. The man who had once seemed confident and in control now appeared more guarded at times. It wasn't just Richard's words that were haunting him. It was the constant pull of his family's expectations. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner with his parents, Kevin was quieter than usual. Emma noticed the shift in him, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and how his shoulders seemed heavier. She had become attuned to these small changes, and it worried her. She decided to confront him, knowing that avoiding the issue would only make things worse. "Kevin," she said softly, as they sat on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city lights, "I can tell something's been bothering you. Is it your parents? Richard?" Kevin sighed, looking out over the city, his expression distant. It's everything, he admitted, his voice low. I don't know how much longer I can keep up this balancing act. On one hand, I want to be with you, to build a future with you. But on the other, I'm constantly torn between what my family expects of me and what I really want. Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You don't have to do it alone, Kevin, she said. We're in this together. Whatever your family expects, whatever Richard says, it doesn't matter. What matters is what you want, what we want. Kevin turned to her, his eyes filled with gratitude. I don't deserve you, he whispered. You're everything I've been looking for. And yet, I keep pulling away, afraid of what I can't give you. I don't want to drag you into my family's mess. Emma smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Kevin, you're not dragging me into anything. We'll face whatever comes, together. I want to be by your side, no matter what happens. For a moment, they simply sat there, holding each other's hands, letting the quiet of the night settle around them. Kevin leaned his head on Emma's shoulder, letting out a long breath. I've been afraid of losing control, he confessed. I've spent my whole life trying to be the man my parents want me to be, the man they've made me into. But with you, I feel like I can breathe, like I don't have to pretend. Emma kissed the top of his head. Then don't, she said, her voice soft but firm. You don't have to be anyone but yourself with me. You've already shown me the real you, and that's the person I want to be with. Kevin looked up at her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. When he didn't find any, he smiled. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. The next day, Kevin made a decision. He was tired of living in the shadow of his family's expectations. He knew he couldn't change everything overnight, but he was ready to take the first step toward living his life on his terms. He called a meeting with his parents and told them he was stepping down from the role they had planned for him in the family business. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was one he needed to have. As he sat across from his parents in their grand office, he could feel the weight of their disapproval pressing down on him. His mother, in particular, looked disappointed, her eyes hardening as she listened to his words. You're making a mistake, Kevin, his father said, his voice cold. You're walking away from everything we've built, from your legacy. Kevin held his ground, his voice steady. No, Dad, I'm walking toward what I want. I'm not going to let your legacy define me anymore. I'm not going to live my life for anyone but myself. His mother's face twisted in frustration. You're throwing away years of hard work, Kevin. Don't you care about the family name? About your future? Kevin shook his head. I care about what's right for me, Mom. I'm not going to do this anymore. I need to find my own path. There was a long, tense silence before his father spoke again. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice laced with anger. But if you're determined to throw it all away, then do it. Just don't expect us to be there for you when it all falls apart. Kevin's heart ached as he heard his father's words. But he knew that he couldn't keep living a life that wasn't his. He had to take control of his own destiny, no matter the cost. As he left the office, the weight of the decision settled heavily on him, but so did a sense of relief. He was finally free to be himself. That evening, when he met Emma, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. She could see the difference in his demeanor as soon as he walked through the door. What happened? She asked, her eyes filled with concern. Kevin smiled, a weight lifting off his shoulders. I did it, he said. I stood up to them. I'm stepping away from the family business. I'm finally living for myself. Emma's face lit up with joy. Kevin, that's amazing, she exclaimed, pulling him into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you. Kevin held her close, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Thank you for believing in me, he whispered. I couldn't have done it without you. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emma realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. They had faced the challenges together, and no matter what came next, they would continue to stand by each other's side. As the days turned into weeks, Kevin felt a newfound sense of freedom that he had never experienced before. The weight of his family's expectations had always been a constant pressure. And now that he had made the bold decision to step away from the family business, he felt like he was finally in control of his own life. It wasn't easy, of course. There were still moments when doubt crept in, especially when he thought about the future and how his decision would affect his relationship with his parents. But with Emma by his side, he felt more confident than ever that he was making the right choice. Emma, too, had noticed the change in Kevin. The man she had come to know was lighter, more open, and more willing to let down the walls he had built over the years. Their relationship had grown stronger with each passing day, and even though they still faced challenges, Emma knew that they could overcome anything as long as they were together. One afternoon, as they were sitting on the couch in Kevin's apartment, Emma turned to him with a serious expression. "Kevin, I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I think it's time we take the next step." Kevin raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" he asked. Emma took a deep breath, her heart racing as she prepared to speak the words she had been holding back for so long. "I think it's time we move in together," she said, her voice filled with both excitement and nervousness. Kevin's eyes widened in surprise, but then he smiled, a genuine smile that made Emma's heart flutter. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice warm and comforting. "I mean, it's a big step." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. "We've been through so much already, and I want to continue building a life with you. I think it's time we take that leap." Kevin looked at her, his smile growing even wider. "Then let's do it," he said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and determination. "Let's take that leap together." The decision to move in together marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. They spent the next few weeks looking for a place that would feel like home for both of them. Kevin wanted to make sure that Emma felt comfortable, so they decided to find a place that was not too far from the city, but also had enough space for both of their needs. After weeks of searching, they finally found the perfect apartment, spacious, cozy, and filled with light. As they unpacked their belongings, Kevin couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for Emma. She had brought so much joy and stability into his life, and now they were taking the next step toward building a future together. They spent the first night in their new apartment talking and laughing, enjoying the quiet moments that came with the decision to share their lives in such an intimate way. Kevin had never imagined that he would be here, in this place, with someone like Emma. She had opened his eyes to a world that was more than just money and status, and he was finally starting to see that happiness wasn't something that could be bought. It was something that came from being with the right person. As they settled into their new life, things felt right. Kevin was starting to focus more on his own ventures, away from the family business, and Emma had begun working on her own dreams as well. They were no longer just a couple navigating through life together. They were partners, each supporting the other's growth. But even in the midst of their happiness, the shadow of Kevin's past still lingered. One day, as they were enjoying a quiet afternoon together, Kevin received a call from his mother. He looked at the screen for a moment before answering, his expression tense. "Mom," he said, his voice cautious. "What's going on?" Emma watched him closely, sensing the shift in his mood. "Kevin, we need to talk." His mother's voice came through the phone, her tone sharp. "You've made a mistake. You can't just walk away from everything like this. There's more at stake here than your personal desires." Kevin's jaw clenched, and Emma could see the frustration building in his expression. "I've made my decision, Mom," he said firmly. "I'm not going back. I'm doing what's best for me, and you'll have to accept that." His mother's response was cold. "You'll regret this. You think you can escape the family legacy, but it's not that simple. We've made sacrifices for you, and now you're throwing it all away." Kevin's hand tightened around his phone, but he didn't raise his voice. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing my own path, one that doesn't revolve around what you and Dad want. I'm not going to be a pawn in your game anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Emma wondered if the conversation had ended. But then his mother spoke again, her voice colder than before. "Fine," she said, her words clipped. "But don't say we didn't warn you. You'll see, Kevin. You'll see what happens when you go against everything we've worked for." Kevin hung up the phone without responding, and for a moment, there was a heavy silence between him and Emma. She could see the toll the conversation had taken on him, and she reached out to take his hand. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Kevin took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I will be," he said, his voice steady, but with a hint of exhaustion. "It's just, they won't ever understand. They'll never accept my decision. But I'm okay with that. I have you now, and that's all that matters." Emma smiled gently, squeezing his hand. "You're not alone, Kevin," she said. "We're in this together, no matter what happens." And as they stood there, hand in hand, Emma knew that their journey wasn't over. They had made it this far, and they would continue to face whatever came their way together. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Emma was confident that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. As weeks passed, since the conversation with Kevin's mother, things seemed to settle into a new, more peaceful rhythm. They were building a life together, making their new apartment feel like home. And Emma felt that she had become more deeply connected with Kevin than ever before. She loved seeing him come alive, focusing on his own projects and passions without the constant pressure of family expectations. But even as things seemed to be progressing smoothly, Emma couldn't help but notice the underlying tension still lingering in Kevin. He tried to hide it, but she could see the occasional distant look in his eyes, the moments when his mind wandered to places she wasn't sure she could follow. It was like he was holding something back, something that he wasn't ready to confront yet. Emma knew Kevin well enough to know that there was more to him than he had revealed, but she respected his space, never pushing him to talk until he was ready. That was until one day, when the weight of it all seemed to break through. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the two of them were enjoying a lazy day at home. Kevin had spent the morning working on a new project for his tech venture, and Emma had spent the day reading in the living room. They were together, but not in an intense, face-to-face way. It was one of those comfortable days where both of them just existed in the same space, content with the quiet. But then, out of nowhere, Kevin's phone rang, and his face instantly changed. It wasn't a call from his parents. That was clear from the look of frustration that crossed his face as he glanced at the screen. Emma saw the sudden tension in his body, the way his fingers gripped the phone as though he were trying to stop it from vibrating right out of his hand. He quickly picked up the phone and walked into the other room, but Emma could still hear the raised voices coming from where she sat. Her heart sank. It was clear that this call was from someone important, and it wasn't good news. She felt a surge of concern, but chose to give Kevin space to handle the situation. When he returned a few minutes later, Emma looked up at him, expecting him to share what had happened. But Kevin just sat down beside her without saying a word, his face strained. She could see that whatever it was, it had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. "What happened?" Emma asked softly, her voice full of concern. Kevin ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tightening. "It's my uncle," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He wants me back. He's threatening to take legal action if I don't return to the company and resume my position." Emma's heart ached as she saw the distress in his eyes. She knew that Kevin's uncle had always been a figure of authority in his life, someone who had always played a major role in shaping his future. But hearing this, it became clear just how far Kevin's family was willing to go to force him back into the fold. "Legal action?" Emma repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. Kevin nodded, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, they're not playing around anymore. My uncle's been talking about suing me for breach of contract. He says I can't just walk away without consequences." Emma felt a wave of anger and frustration on Kevin's behalf. She had seen firsthand how hard he had worked to build something of his own, away from the shadows of his family. Now, it seemed like they were trying to drag him back into the life he had fought so hard to escape. "Kevin, you can't let them do this to you," she said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "You've already made your decision. You don't owe them anything." Kevin let out a bitter laugh, but there was no joy in it. "It's not that simple, Emma. They've been controlling every part of my life for so long. They have so much power over everything, over my business, over my finances. I don't know how to fight them. It feels like I'm stuck between what I want and what they expect from me." Emma took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Kevin, you're not alone in this. You don't have to do this by yourself. I'm here for you, and we'll figure this out together." Kevin looked at her, his eyes softening. "I don't want to drag you into this," he said quietly. "This is my mess, not yours." Emma shook her head, her expression resolute. "You're not dragging me into anything. This is our life now, Kevin. We're partners, remember? And no matter how tough this gets, I'll stand by you." For the first time in days, Kevin's shoulders seemed to relax, as if a weight had been lifted from them. He leaned forward, kissing Emma on the forehead. "Thank you," he said softly. "You always know how to make me feel like I'm not alone." Emma smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "That's because you're not." We'll figure this out, Kevin, whatever it takes. Over the next few days, Kevin began to take action. He consulted with lawyers to understand his rights and the legal ramifications of his uncle's threats. He was no longer willing to let his family control his life. With Emma's support, he was slowly gaining the strength he needed to fight back. But as he prepared for what was sure to be a long and difficult battle, he realized that the real challenge wasn't just the legal fight, it was about staying true to himself, no matter what. As Emma watched Kevin stand up for himself, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. She had always admired his strength and determination, but now, seeing him fight for his freedom in such a personal way, she admired him even more. They were no longer just facing challenges together, they were fighting for their future, side by side. And no matter what came next, Emma knew that they were stronger than anything his family could throw their way. The tension between Kevin and his family only seemed to grow as the legal battle began. Every day, new threats and accusations came from his uncle, trying to force him back into the family business. Kevin had expected this, but nothing could have prepared him for just how relentless and unforgiving his family could be. He found himself spending long hours on the phone with his lawyer, going over contracts and legal jargon that was foreign to him. Despite everything, Kevin remained determined to see it through. He wasn't going to let his uncle or anyone else dictate his life anymore. Emma, as always, was by his side. She had been his constant support, even on the days when he felt like giving up. Her presence had a calming effect on him, reminding him that they were in this together. She helped him stay grounded when the pressure became too much to handle, and she kept him focused on the bigger picture. It wasn't just about fighting his family, it was about reclaiming his life and his future. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that the situation was taking its toll on Kevin. He was exhausted, both mentally and physically. His sleep had become restless, and he often found himself lost in thought, unable to focus on anything else. Emma could see the strain on his face, the lines of stress deepening with each passing day. She knew that it was more than just the legal battle weighing on him, it was the emotional cost of standing up to his family, of breaking away from everything he had known for so long. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and phone calls, Kevin came home to find Emma waiting for him with a cup of tea. He smiled weakly as he sank into the couch, exhausted. Emma sat beside him, her eyes filled with concern. "You need to rest, Kevin," she said softly, her hand brushing against his. "You've been pushing yourself too hard." Kevin let out a sigh, rubbing his temples. "I know, I can't stop. I can't let them win." Emma took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I know you're trying to fight for your future, but you're not going to get anywhere if you burn yourself out." Kevin looked at her, his eyes tired but filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said quietly. "You keep me sane." Emma smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm always here for you, Kevin, but you also need to take care of yourself. We can't do this if you're not at your best." Kevin nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He had been so focused on the fight that he had forgotten to take care of himself. He had neglected the very thing that kept him going. His own well-being. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I've been so caught up in all of this that I haven't been paying attention to what matters most." Emma smiled softly, her fingers tracing the lines of his hand. "We'll figure this out, together, one step at a time." Over the next few days, Kevin began to slow down. He took time off from his work to rest and recharge, knowing that the fight with his family was far from over. He focused on spending time with Emma, finding comfort in the quiet moments they shared. They took walks in the park, cooked dinner together, and talked about their future. For the first time in a while, Kevin allowed himself to think beyond the legal battle. He began to see that there was more to life than just winning. There was also joy in the small moments, the ones that didn't require a fight. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Emma turned to Kevin, her eyes thoughtful. "What do you want for your future, Kevin?" she asked, her voice soft. Kevin paused, looking out at the horizon. "I want peace," he said quietly. "I want to live my life on my terms, without the constant pressure of family expectations. I want to build something that's truly mine, something that makes me happy." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "And you will, Kevin. I believe in you." Kevin looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Emma. I don't know how I ended up with someone like you, but I'm so grateful that I did. Emma leaned in, kissing him softly on the cheek. I'm grateful for you, too, she said. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. As the days turned into weeks, Kevin found the strength to continue his fight with his family, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't fighting for approval anymore. He was fighting for himself, for the life he wanted to build with Emma. And with each step, he grew more confident in his decision to break away from his family's control. Together, they were creating their own future, one where love, trust, and freedom took precedence over wealth and legacy. And as Kevin looked at Emma, he knew that no matter how difficult the journey ahead might be, they would face it together, side by side. As the days passed, the pressure from Kevin's family did not ease. Despite his decision to step away from the business and the emotional toll it was taking on him, his uncle, father, and even his mother were relentless in their attempts to control his future. The threats had intensified, not just legally, but personally, as they used every tool at their disposal to try to get him back into the fold. The constant pressure, the back-and-forth legal battles, and the emotional strain were beginning to take a toll on Kevin. The confident, assured man Emma had come to know was starting to wear thin. He had become quieter, more withdrawn, and spent more time alone, contemplating what his future would truly look like. Emma could see the change in him and knew that she needed to be there more than ever. She could feel the weight on his shoulders, but no matter how much she tried to help, it seemed like Kevin was still shouldering all of it alone. One night, after a particularly difficult conversation with his lawyer, Kevin came home looking exhausted, as though the fight had worn him down completely. Emma was in the kitchen, making dinner, when she heard the door open. She looked over her shoulder and saw Kevin walking in, his face pale and his shoulders hunched. He gave her a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," he said softly, trying to mask the exhaustion in his voice. Emma could see right through the facade. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, setting the spoon down and walking over to him. Kevin ran a hand through his hair, his expression defeated. "I don't know," he muttered. "It's getting harder, Emma. I keep fighting, but it feels like I'm losing." Emma stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. "You're not losing, Kevin," she said, her voice full of tenderness. "You're doing everything you can. You've made a decision, and that takes courage. You're standing up for yourself, and that's something most people can't do." Kevin sighed, leaning against the wall as if the weight of the world were pressing down on him. "But at what cost? I've lost so much already. The business, my family's respect. They keep telling me I'll regret this, and I don't know if I can keep fighting them. I don't know if I have the strength anymore." Emma could feel the pain in his words, the raw honesty of his fear. She walked over to him, taking his hands in hers, grounding him. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. "I'm here for you no matter what. We'll get through this together." Kevin looked at her, his eyes searching hers as if looking for some reassurance, some sign that they could make it through this. "You really mean that?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded, her voice firm. "I've always meant it. I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together, Kevin. You're not alone." Kevin's expression softened, and he pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly as if trying to draw strength from her presence. For a moment, the weight of his struggles seemed to lift, if only for a second. He had Emma by his side, and that was more than he had ever expected in this battle. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Emma smiled gently, resting her head on his chest. "You'll never have to find out," she said, her voice steady. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." As the evening wore on, they sat down to dinner, and although the conversation was light, the weight of Kevin's burden was still there, hovering in the background. But for that moment, they had each other. And for the first time in weeks, Kevin felt a sense of peace. The legal battle would continue, and the threats from his family wouldn't stop, but with Emma's support, he knew that he could face whatever came next. It wasn't just about fighting for his freedom anymore. It was about standing up for the life he wanted, the life they wanted to build together. Over the next few days, Kevin began to regain his focus. He attended more meetings with his lawyer, started working on his own business projects again, and tried to ignore the constant barrage of messages from his family. But no matter how hard he tried to push them out of his mind, they still had a way of creeping in. Emma, ever supportive, continued to encourage him to stay true to his vision. She reminded him that the life they were building together was worth the fight. As the weeks passed, Kevin's determination grew stronger. He began to take small steps forward, focusing more on his work and less on the toxic grip his family had on him. He reached out to potential investors for his new tech venture, determined to carve out a future of his own. And slowly but surely, he started to feel the weight of his family's expectations lifting. But just as things were starting to look up, there was a new development. Kevin's uncle had pulled out all the stops and had sent one last ultimatum, offering Kevin a substantial sum of money to come back to the business and repair the damage that had been done. The offer was tempting, but Kevin didn't hesitate. He had made up his mind, and nothing was going to change that. He declined the offer, fully aware of the consequences it might bring. That night, after the call, Kevin sat down with Emma, his face weary but resolute. "I turned it down," he said quietly. Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice full of admiration. Kevin smiled faintly, his eyes tired but unwavering. "I couldn't go back, not after everything. I need to keep moving forward no matter what." Emma leaned in, kissing him softly. "You've got this, Kevin. We've got this. Together." And as they sat there, hand in hand, the world felt a little lighter. No matter what the future held, they knew they could face it side by side. As the months passed, Kevin and Emma found a rhythm in their life together. The legal battle with his family was still ongoing. But with each passing day, Kevin felt stronger, more certain of his decision. The constant pressure and manipulation from his family had been draining, but now he was beginning to take control of his own narrative. He was no longer just the heir to his family's fortune. He was carving out a path of his own. He had started a new tech venture, something he was passionate about, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, he felt invigorated by the challenge. Emma stood by his side every step of the way, supporting him in ways that he had never expected. She encouraged him to follow his instincts, to trust in his ability to build something on his own. Her belief in him gave him the strength to keep going, even when doubts crept in. They spent their days enjoying the simple pleasures of life, the quiet moments at home, cooking dinner together, laughing over coffee, and dreaming about the future. But even as they found happiness in the small things, Kevin knew that the storm was not over. His family was still fighting him, and they had no intention of letting him go without a fight. One day, Kevin received a call that he had been dreading. His lawyer informed him that his uncle had escalated the legal battle, threatening to take Kevin to court for breach of contract. It was the last thing Kevin wanted to deal with, but he knew he had to face it head on. He walked into the living room, where Emma was sitting, her eyes filled with concern. "It's happening again," Kevin said, his voice filled with frustration. "They're taking me to court." Emma stood up and walked over to him, placing her hand gently on his arm. "You've already made your decision, Kevin," she said softly. "You don't have to go back. I'm here for you, no matter what." Kevin looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You don't have to worry about that. We're in this together, remember? I believe in you, and I know you can handle this." Kevin let out a deep sigh, his shoulders sagging slightly. "It's just hard. Every time I think I'm making progress, they pull me back in. I don't know if I can keep fighting them forever." Emma took both of his hands in hers, her touch firm and reassuring. "You don't have to do it forever, Kevin. You've already made it this far. And no matter what happens, you have me. You're not alone." Kevin nodded slowly, his resolve strengthening as he looked into her eyes. He had spent so much of his life trying to meet the expectations of others. But now, for the first time, he was fighting for himself and for the life he wanted with Emma. The next few days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and legal strategies as Kevin prepared for the inevitable court battle. But despite the pressure mounting around him, he remained focused. He had a clear vision of what he wanted: freedom, peace, and a life built on his own terms. With Emma's support, he was ready to face whatever came next. One afternoon, as Kevin was going over some paperwork at the kitchen table, Emma walked in with a tray of coffee and a smile. She set the tray down in front of him and kissed his cheek. "Take a break," she said gently. "You've been working non-stop." Kevin looked up at her, his eyes tired but full of appreciation. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said, his voice soft. "You keep me grounded." Emma smiled, sitting down beside him. "I'm just happy to be here with you," she replied. "We're in this together, remember? No matter how tough it gets, we'll face it side by side." Kevin's heart swelled with gratitude as he looked at her. He had never known a love like this, one that felt so unconditional, so real. Emma had been his rock through every challenge, and now he was determined to build a future with her, one that was free from the constraints of his family's expectations. A few weeks later, the court hearing arrived. Kevin was nervous, but he felt more prepared than he had ever been. He had gathered all the evidence he needed to prove his case, and he knew that he had a solid legal team behind him. Emma was there with him every step of the way, offering words of encouragement and staying by his side throughout the entire process. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, Kevin walked into the courtroom with a newfound sense of confidence. He was no longer the scared, conflicted man he had been just months ago. He had found his strength, his voice, and his future. The trial was long, and the tension in the room was palpable. Kevin's family threw everything they had at him, trying to paint him as a reckless, irresponsible son who was throwing away everything they had worked for. But Kevin stood firm, presenting his case with conviction, showing the judge that he had every right to make his own choices, to live his life as he saw fit. When the judge's decision came, it was a victory for Kevin. The court ruled in his favor, dismissing the charges and affirming his right to step away from the family business. Kevin couldn't believe it. It was a hard-fought battle, but it was finally over. As he walked out of the courtroom, his heart was lighter than it had been in years. And when he looked at Emma, standing there waiting for him, he knew that he had made the right choice. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with awe and relief. Emma smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "I knew you could do it," she said, her voice filled with admiration. Kevin pulled her into an embrace, his heart full. He had fought for his freedom, and now he was free to build the life he had always dreamed of with Emma by his side. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Kevin knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Emma, he was ready to face it. Together, they had overcome every obstacle, and there was nothing they couldn't handle. They had fought for their future, and now, it was theirs to build. The victory in court was a turning point for Kevin and Emma. It marked the end of one chapter in their lives and the beginning of another, one filled with the promise of freedom and the chance to build a future together. Kevin felt lighter, as if the years of tension and struggle had finally been lifted off his shoulders. The weight of his family's control, the constant pressure, and the endless expectations had all melted away in that courtroom. With Emma by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The first few weeks after the trial were filled with moments of relief and celebration. Kevin took some time to focus on his new business ventures, pouring his energy into his passions and rediscovering the joy of working for himself. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years, and he realized how much he had been held back by the family's expectations. Emma continued to be his rock, supporting him every step of the way. They spent time together, enjoying the peace that had come with the resolution of the legal battle. Their relationship had deepened in ways that neither of them had expected. What had started as a connection built on honesty and understanding had blossomed into something even more powerful. They were no longer just two people trying to navigate life's challenges, they were partners, building a future together. But despite the happiness they were finding in each other, there was still one thing hanging over Kevin's head: his family. Even though they had lost the legal battle, his family's influence and their judgment still loomed large in his mind. It was something that Kevin hadn't been able to fully shake off. He had been raised to value family loyalty above all else, and even though he had walked away from the business, there were moments when he still felt the pull of their expectations. One afternoon, as Kevin sat at his desk working on a new project, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his heart sank when he saw that it was his mother. He had not spoken to her since the court ruling, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face her again. With a deep breath, he answered the call. "Hello, Mom," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Kevin?" His mother's voice came through, strained and cold. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. I want to apologize for how I reacted. I know you made your decision, and I want you to know that I respect that." Kevin was taken aback by her words. He had never expected an apology from her, especially not after everything that had happened. "I appreciate that," Kevin said, his voice softening. "But you have to understand that this is what I needed. I couldn't keep living under the pressure of your expectations. I need to live my life for me, not for anyone else." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I know, Kevin," his mother said quietly, "and I think I've finally come to understand that. I may not agree with everything you've done, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I just want you to be happy." Kevin was silent for a moment, processing her words. He had always wanted his mother's approval, but he had never imagined that it would come with such conditions. "Thank you," he said finally. "That means a lot to me." They talked for a little while longer, the conversation feeling awkward but somewhat more genuine than it had in the past. Kevin could feel the tension between them starting to dissolve, but he knew that things would never be the same. He had walked away from the life they had planned for him, and no amount of apology could erase that. Still, it was a step forward, a step that allowed him to feel like he was no longer fighting to meet someone else's expectations. When he hung up the phone, Kevin felt a mix of emotions. He was relieved to have had the conversation, but he also felt a sense of loss. The relationship with his family would never be what it once was, and that was something he had to come to terms with. Emma, who had been sitting nearby, looked at him with a mixture of concern and understanding. "How did it go?" she asked softly. Kevin looked at her, his expression conflicted. "It was better than I expected. She apologized, said she respected my decision. But I don't know if I believe it, Emma. I don't think I can ever fully forgive them for everything." Emma walked over to him, her hand gently resting on his arm. "You don't have to forgive them if you're not ready," she said softly. "But you've made the right choice for yourself. You don't need their approval to be happy. You've already built something amazing on your own." Kevin looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma smiled, leaning in to kiss him on the cheek. "You don't need to thank me," she said gently. "We're in this together. I'll always be here for you." As the days passed, Kevin found himself growing more at peace with the choices he had made. The distance from his family, though painful, was becoming more manageable. He was finally free to build a future on his own terms, without the constant pressure to conform to anyone else's idea of who he should be. And with Emma by his side, he knew that anything was possible. Together, they had already overcome so much, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Kevin had come a long way from the man he once was conflicted, uncertain, and trapped by the expectations of those around him. Now, he was someone who had found his own voice, his own purpose, and the courage to live a life that was authentically his. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that the possibilities were endless. With Emma's love and support, the life they had dreamed of was finally within their reach. As the months passed, life for Kevin and Emma continued to evolve. They had both changed, each becoming more confident in their own right. Kevin's business ventures had started to gain traction, and he was finally starting to see the fruits of his labor. It wasn't easy, but every day, he felt closer to the life he had always wanted, one built on his own terms, free from the expectations of his family. He had surrounded himself with a team of loyal colleagues who believed in his vision, and his company was beginning to grow in ways he hadn't imagined. But even as he thrived professionally, there were still moments of doubt. Kevin had come to terms with the fact that his family would never fully accept his decision, and while he had made peace with that, the pain of the distance between them was still there. They hadn't spoken much since the court case, and every now and then, Kevin wondered if he had made the right choice. Would they ever come around? Could he ever find a way to reconcile the life he wanted with the family he had left behind? Emma, ever the anchor, had been there through every struggle. She could see the occasional flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the moments when he seemed lost in thought. But she also knew that he was strong. She had witnessed firsthand how much Kevin had grown, how much he had fought for his independence, and how far he had come. As they sat together one evening in their living room, Emma could see that Kevin was preoccupied, his mind drifting. "Hey," she said softly, breaking the silence. Kevin looked up at her, his expression softening. "What's on your mind?" she asked, concerned. Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about everything. My family. They still haven't reached out, and I don't know if they ever will. I thought it would get easier, but sometimes I feel like I'm losing them for good." Emma's heart ached for him. She knew how much Kevin had longed for his family's approval, even after all that had happened. "Kevin, I know this is hard," she said gently. "But you have to remember why you did this in the first place. You've made your life your own, and you're building something incredible. You've proven to yourself that you don't need their approval to succeed." Kevin nodded slowly, but the sadness in his eyes was hard to miss. "I know, I thought they would come around. I didn't think it would be like this. I didn't think I would lose them for good." Emma reached over and took his hand in hers, her touch warm and reassuring. "Sometimes, the people we love don't understand our choices. It doesn't mean we've made the wrong ones. You've made a choice for your happiness, Kevin. And that's more than most people can say." Kevin squeezed her hand, grateful for her words, though he still felt a pang of loss. "You're right," he said, his voice tinged with quiet resolve. "I have to let go of the past, even if it hurts. I can't keep waiting for them to accept me. I have to move forward." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with admiration for him. "And you will," she said, "because you're stronger than you think. You've already come so far." Over the following weeks, Kevin focused even more on his work, diving deeper into his business projects. With Emma's unwavering support, he was able to fully embrace the life he had built for himself. He started taking more risks, experimenting with new ideas, and pushing his business into exciting new directions. Emma, too, was thriving. She had begun her own personal project, something she had always dreamed of doing but never thought she could. She started a small online business, offering consulting services for people looking to improve their digital marketing strategies. It was something she had always been passionate about, and now, with Kevin's encouragement, she was finally pursuing it. The couple found themselves balancing their personal and professional lives with ease, supporting each other through both successes and challenges. They made time for each other, going on dates, traveling, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. But there was still one lingering issue that Kevin couldn't fully shake: his family. As his business grew, he continued to hear rumors about his family's disapproval, their attempts to undermine his success. It wasn't easy to ignore, but Kevin remained focused on his vision, knowing that the life he was building with Emma was more than enough. One evening, Kevin came home to find a letter on their doorstep. It was from his mother. Hesitant, he opened it, and as he read the words, his heart began to race. It was an invitation to meet. His mother had finally reached out. The letter was brief but heartfelt, offering an olive branch of sorts. She wrote that she wanted to see him, to talk about everything that had happened, and to find a way to move forward. Kevin was torn. Part of him wanted to meet with her, to try to rebuild some kind of connection, but another part of him wasn't sure if he was ready. He had fought so hard to get to this point, to build a life without the constant influence of his family. Was he willing to open that door again? Emma, sensing his inner conflict, sat beside him. "What's the letter say?" she asked softly. Kevin looked at her, his eyes conflicted. "It's from my mom," he said quietly. "She wants to meet. She wants to talk." Emma took a deep breath. "What do you want to do, Kevin?" she asked. "It's your choice." Kevin thought for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he looked at Emma, his resolve clear. "I'm not sure what will happen, but I think it's time. I can't keep running from the past forever. I need to face it, even if it's hard." Emma smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here for you," she said, squeezing his hand. "We'll face it together." Kevin took a deep breath, a sense of calm settling over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt ready to confront the past. He wasn't doing it for his family's approval. He was doing it for himself, for the life he had built with Emma. No matter what happened, he knew that they could face anything together. Kevin had made the decision to meet with his mother, but even as he sat in their apartment, holding the letter in his hand, he wasn't entirely sure what to expect. He had spent years resisting the pressure from his family, and the thought of opening that door again made him anxious. However, deep down, he knew it was time. He could no longer live with the uncertainty, the unresolved tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. Emma, as always, was his pillar of strength. She had supported him through everything: the legal battle, the distance from his family, the emotional weight that came with breaking away from the life he was supposed to lead. But now, As Kevin prepared to face the past, Emma could see that he was struggling. She could feel the tension in the air as she sat beside him, watching him stare at the letter. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Kevin looked at her, his expression conflicted. "I don't know, Emma," he admitted. "I thought I was done with them, but now I'm not sure. It's been so long, and I've built a life without them. Do I really want to bring them back in?" Emma placed her hand gently on his. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I'll be here with you, no matter what. But sometimes, it's important to face the things that have been holding you back. You've already made so many brave decisions, Kevin. I know you can handle this." Kevin met her gaze, finding the reassurance he needed in her eyes. He had always admired her strength, her unwavering belief in him. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I can't keep running from this forever. It's time to face it." With that, he made the call. His mother answered almost immediately, and though her voice was softer than he remembered, there was still an edge to it. "Kevin," she said, "I'm glad you called." There was a brief pause, and Kevin could feel his heart racing. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she continued, "and I want to see you, to talk. I know it's been a long time, but I'm ready. Are you?" Kevin closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before responding. "I'm ready," he said. "Let's meet." The following day, Kevin found himself sitting across from his mother in a quiet cafe, the weight of the years between them hanging heavy in the air. His mother looked older, her face more lined than he remembered, but there was a warmth in her eyes as she looked at him. For a moment, it felt like time had stood still, and he was back to the young man who had been trying to please his family, trying to meet their expectations. But this was different. Kevin was no longer that man. He had grown, changed, and built a life for himself. He wasn't the same person who had left all those years ago. "I'm glad you agreed to meet," his mother said, breaking the silence. "I know this hasn't been easy, for either of us. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, for everything." Kevin's heart clenched as he listened to her words. He hadn't expected an apology, and hearing it now, after everything that had happened, felt both relieving and heartbreaking. "I've always loved you, Kevin," his mother continued, "but I didn't know how to let go. I didn't know how to accept your choices. I see now that I've been wrong, that you've had to fight for everything you want. I see how much strength it's taken, and I'm proud of you." Kevin swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He had spent so many years feeling like he wasn't enough for her, like he had to prove himself. And now, here she was, acknowledging his struggle, his independence, and his need for freedom. For the first time in years, Kevin felt like he was truly being seen. "It's not just about the business, is it?" Kevin asked, his voice steady but full of emotion. "It's about control, about me never being good enough unless I followed the path you and Dad set for me." His mother looked down, her hands resting on the table, as if searching for the right words. "Yes," she admitted. "I thought I was doing what was best for you. But I see now that I've been controlling, that I've been putting my own desires above yours. And I'm sorry. You had every right to make your own choices." Kevin felt a sense of relief wash over him, but it was tinged with sadness. "I've spent so many years trying to meet your expectations," he said softly. "I thought that was the only way I could make you proud. But in the end, I had to choose my own path. It wasn't easy, and it still isn't. But it's mine." His mother nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I see that now," she whispered. "I see how much you've fought for yourself, for your happiness. And I'm proud of you, Kevin. I'm proud of the man you've become." There was a long silence between them, as if both of them were processing the weight of everything that had been said. Kevin felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite express. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had before," he said quietly. "But maybe we can start something new, something different." His mother reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'm willing to try, Kevin." As Kevin looked at his mother, something shifted inside of him. The distance that had once felt so insurmountable now seemed a little smaller. He knew that the road ahead would still be difficult, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. He had fought for his own life, and in doing so, he had created the space for reconciliation, not just with his family, but with himself. When he left the cafe that afternoon, he felt lighter, as if the past had finally begun to release its grip on him. And as he walked out into the world with Emma by his side, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together stronger, more united than ever. The afternoon Kevin spent with his mother marked a turning point in his life, a moment of reconnection that he never thought would come. As he walked out of the cafe, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter, but the road ahead was still uncertain. He had made strides in healing the rift with his family, but there were many things still left unsaid, many wounds that time alone wouldn't heal. Yet, for the first time in years, Kevin felt a flicker of hope that he could reconcile the man he had become with the family he had left behind. The reconciliation with his mother was a small but significant victory. It didn't erase the pain of the years that had passed, but it offered him a chance for something new, something different. As he met Emma later that day, he could see the same concern in her eyes, but also the same love and support she had always shown. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice soft but full of understanding. Kevin smiled, a weight lifting off his chest. "Better than I expected," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. She apologized. "We talked. It wasn't easy, but it was something I needed to do." Emma reached out and took his hand in hers, squeezing it gently. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice full of affection. "You've come so far, Kevin, and no matter what happens, I'm here for you." Kevin looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "We're a team," she said. "We always will be." As Kevin and Emma moved forward in their lives, they both found a sense of fulfillment in the work they were doing. Kevin's business continued to thrive, and his new ventures were starting to take shape. He had the freedom now to make his own choices, to build something that was truly his. He was no longer the man who had been weighed down by family expectations. And he was finally free to follow his passions. Emma, too, had found success in her own way. Her online business was growing, and she was able to use her skills to help others achieve their own goals. She had built something for herself, something she was proud of. Together, they were creating a life that was fulfilling, one where they were both able to chase their dreams and find joy in the journey. But even as they basked in the success of their newfound independence, there were moments when Kevin found himself reflecting on the past. He still hadn't fully let go of the idea of reconciliation with his family. His mother's apology was a step in the right direction. But what about his father? What about his uncle? Kevin knew that his family still had a hold on him, even if he was no longer actively involved in their business. The pressure, the expectations, the history, it was all still there, lurking beneath the surface. He couldn't just pretend it didn't exist. One day, Kevin received a letter from his father. It was short, direct, and to the point. It acknowledged the rift between them and expressed disappointment that things had turned out the way they did. It didn't apologize in the same way his mother had, but it was clear that his father was willing to communicate. The letter also mentioned the future of the family business, something that still hung over Kevin's head. His father was asking him to come back, to consider rejoining the company in some capacity. The offer was tempting, and for a moment, Kevin felt the familiar pull of responsibility. He had spent so much of his life trying to please his family, trying to live up to their expectations. But now, as he sat holding the letter in his hands, he felt a deep sense of peace. He didn't need their approval anymore. He had built something of his own, and he wasn't willing to throw that away for the sake of family loyalty. He knew that he had made the right choice in stepping away, and nothing, not even a letter from his father, could change that. Kevin showed the letter to Emma that evening, and she could immediately tell how conflicted he was. "What are you thinking?" she asked gently. Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to go back, to make things right. But another part of me knows that I can't go back to that life. I've built something for myself, and I'm finally at a place where I'm doing what I love. I can't risk losing that." Emma smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know it's hard, Kevin," she said. "But you've come so far. You've created a life that's yours. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to go back. You're stronger than that." Kevin looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Emma leaned in and kissed him gently on the cheek. "You'll never have to find out," she whispered. Kevin knew she was right. He had come so far, and he wasn't about to let anyone, family or otherwise, pull him back into a life he had fought so hard to escape. The decision was his, and it was time to move forward, not backward. As the weeks passed, Kevin focused more on his business and his future. He had created something truly his own, something that was built on his values and his vision. He wasn't going to let anyone, including his family, dictate his future. And as he looked at Emma, standing by his side, he knew that together they could conquer anything. They had already faced so much, and they had come out stronger on the other side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, hand in hand. As the months continued to pass, Kevin found himself standing at a crossroads once again, though this time the situation felt different. He had spent years running from the expectations of his family, from the life that had been mapped out for him long before he had the chance to make his own choices. He had fought and won in the courtroom and had ultimately walked away from the family business, something he had once thought he would inherit. He had started his own tech venture, built a new life, and found happiness in a way he never thought possible. Emma, as always, had been by his side, supporting him through every challenge. Their relationship had grown stronger, their connection deeper with each passing day. But despite all of their accomplishments and the progress Kevin had made, there was still one thing on his mind: his father. The offer to return to the family business had weighed heavily on Kevin ever since he received that letter. While his mother had extended a heartfelt apology and seemed ready to move forward, his father's cold, matter-of-fact tone in his letter had left a lingering doubt in Kevin's mind. The family business, the legacy, it was all still there, lurking in the background. Kevin had been living his life for the first time in years, free of the constraints his family had placed on him, and yet the thought of what his father had said kept him awake at night. He knew the decision he had made to leave had been the right one for him, but could he really cut ties completely with everything he had known? Could he ever truly move on from his family, from the life he was supposed to lead? These questions gnawed at him, and even though he had made a life for himself that he was proud of, part of him still felt a pull back toward the past. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Kevin finally turned to Emma and spoke what had been on his mind for weeks. "I got another letter from my father," he said, his voice low, the words heavy. Emma looked at him, concern flickering in her eyes. "What did it say?" she asked gently. Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He's asking again, offering a position, asking me to come back. He's still holding on to the idea that I'll come back into the fold. I don't know what to do." Emma placed her hand on his, her touch grounding him. "Kevin, you've made it this far without them," she said, her voice steady but kind. "You've built something on your own. The life you have now, this is your life. Your happiness is here, with what you've created, with what we've built." Kevin looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "I know," he said softly, "but it's hard. I keep thinking, what if this is all a mistake? What if I'm throwing away everything they've worked for?" Emma squeezed his hand, offering him the reassurance he needed. "But what have you worked for, Kevin? What is it you really want? This business, this life you've created, this love we've found, it's yours. You've fought for it, and no one can take that away from you. You don't owe them anything." Kevin nodded slowly, feeling the familiar pull of his family's expectations, but also feeling the warmth of Emma's words wrap around him like a comforting embrace. He knew she was right. He had built a life that was truly his, and while the offer from his father still lingered in the back of his mind, he knew he couldn't let it define him any longer. The next day, after a sleepless night of contemplation, Kevin sat down and wrote a letter to his father. He thanked him for the offer, for the opportunity to return to the business, but made it clear that he had moved on. He told his father that he had built something of his own, and that, for the first time in his life, he was pursuing what made him happy. It wasn't easy for Kevin to write the letter. There was a part of him that still longed for his father's approval, that wanted to make him proud. But as he finished the letter, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He was no longer the man who would bend to his family's will, who would live for their expectations. He was living for himself, for his future with Emma. When Kevin sent the letter, He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was no longer about choosing between two worlds, it was about accepting that he could create his own world. He didn't need his family's approval to be successful, to be happy. He had already achieved that on his own. Emma could see the change in him immediately. He was lighter, more at ease with himself. The doubt and the uncertainty that had clouded his mind were gone, replaced with a renewed sense of purpose. "I did it," Kevin said quietly to her one evening as they sat together in the apartment. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Kevin," she said softly. "You made the right choice. This is your life, and you're living it on your own terms." Kevin leaned in and kissed her gently. "I couldn't have done it without you," he whispered. Emma smiled, holding him close. "We've done it together," she said. As they stood together, looking toward the future, Kevin knew that the challenges weren't over. His family might never fully understand his choices, but he had made peace with that. The future, the life they were building, was his own. With Emma by his side, there was nothing they couldn't face, no obstacle they couldn't overcome. Together, they had found freedom. And with that freedom came the ability to create a future filled with possibility and love. Whatever the next chapter held, Kevin was ready to face it head-on, knowing that he had everything he needed right there with him. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did Kevin and Emma's life together. Kevin's decision to fully step away from his family's business had been the catalyst for a new chapter, not just for him, but for both of them. The weight of his family's expectations had been replaced with a new sense of freedom, a freedom that was not only liberating but fulfilling. He had fully immersed himself in his business venture, a tech startup that was quickly becoming successful. The passion he once reserved for the family business was now poured into creating something truly his own, and the results were starting to speak for themselves. His company was growing, and with Emma's help, they had formed a strong, dynamic team. Emma had become not only his partner in life but in business as well, offering her expertise in digital marketing, guiding their brand, and helping them expand into new markets. Their bond had become even more solidified as they worked toward a common goal, each trusting the other's instincts and vision. Kevin found himself thriving in ways he had never thought possible. He was living on his own terms, something he had longed for throughout his entire life. Emma was his anchor, the one person who had always believed in him even when he doubted himself. Together, they created a balance between personal and professional life that allowed them to nurture both their relationship and their dreams. But despite the success, there were moments when Kevin would reflect on the years that had passed and what he had left behind. The distance from his family had never been easy, and though he had made peace with his decision to walk away, there were times when a small part of him longed for the approval he had never received. He often found himself wondering what could have been if things had been different. Could he have forged his own path without the rift? Would his father have accepted him for who he had become? Kevin knew these thoughts would always linger in the back of his mind, but he had come to realize that the future they were building together was far more important than the past he could never change. One weekend, while enjoying a quiet evening together, Kevin received a call that would change everything. It was from his mother, and her voice, though soft, carried a weight that caught him off guard. "Kevin, it's your father," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's had a change of heart. He wants to meet. He's ready to talk about everything, to make amends. He wants to apologize for the way things ended between you two." Kevin's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this, not after all this time, not after everything that had happened. The thought of meeting his father again, of reopening a chapter that had been closed for so long, sent a rush of emotions through him. Emma, who had been sitting beside him, could see the confusion and uncertainty on his face. She placed a reassuring hand on his. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," she said gently. "But if you feel it's the right time, I'll be with you every step of the way." Kevin looked at her, her unwavering support giving him the strength to move forward. "I don't know what will happen," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But maybe it's time. Maybe I need this closure. I've come so far, but I can't ignore this anymore." Emma smiled softly, her eyes full of understanding. "You've got this, Kevin, and no matter what happens, I'm here for you." The meeting was arranged, and the day finally came when Kevin stood face to face with his father for the first time in years. He had no idea what to expect. Would his father be different? Would there be resentment still lingering between them? Or would this be the moment that changed everything? When Kevin entered the room, he was taken aback by how much his father had aged. The man who once seemed invincible now looked tired, worn by time and regret. His father stood up slowly, a tentative expression on his face, before he extended his hand to Kevin. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kevin could feel his heart pounding, the emotions of the past coming to the surface. But then his father spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Kevin," he said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For the way I treated you. I pushed you away, and I see now that I lost so much because of it. I wanted you to be something I thought you should be, and I didn't see who you really were. I didn't see the man you were becoming. And for that, I'm truly sorry." Kevin stood frozen for a moment, the weight of his father's apology sinking in. For so long, he had carried the bitterness of their relationship, the pain of never feeling good enough. But now, here it was, the acknowledgement he had always wanted but never thought he'd get. "It's not just about the business, Dad," Kevin said, his voice shaking slightly. "It's about the years I spent trying to live up to something I wasn't, trying to make you proud of someone I wasn't. I needed you to see me for who I really am, not the person you thought I should be." His father nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know, Kevin, and I failed you. I see that now. I see how much you've accomplished on your own, and I can't tell you how proud I am of you. I just wish I had seen it sooner." Kevin took a deep breath, his heart heavy with mixed emotions. "I don't know what to say, Dad. It's been a long time. I've had to let go of a lot, and I'm not sure if we can just pick up where we left off." His father's eyes filled with understanding. "I don't expect that, Kevin. I know I can't just fix things with a few words, but I want to try. I want to be a part of your life again, if you'll let me." For the first time in years, Kevin felt a sense of hope for the future. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead would be long. But this was the first step toward healing, a step that Kevin had never thought possible. As he left the meeting, he felt lighter, as if a piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. He had made peace with the past, and now he was ready to embrace the future with Emma by his side. Together, they had built a life full of promise, and whatever the next chapter held, Kevin knew they would face it together stronger than before, ready for whatever came next.